Welcome everyone to this webinar series. I hope you're doing well. This is a webinar dedicated to Microsoft Office 365 and SharePoint technology. Let me start by introducing a little bit about the organization that I work for. I work for a company called NIFTIT, and we basically dedicate our efforts towards SharePoint and Office 365, and we have office located in New York, in Vietnam, and Hong Kong. And we've been doing that for about 4 years now, really dedicating ourselves to building like pretty creative and nice solutions revolving around those technologies. A little bit about myself. My name is Kwa Kwach. I'm the CEO and co-founder at NIFTIT. I'm pretty active in the SharePoint community. So I organize the Brooklyn SharePoint user group, co-organize the SharePoint Hong Kong Saturdays, and I'm speaker in a few webinar series and events around the globe. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to email me. Here's my email information, as well as my Twitter information in case you have any feedbacks, comments, questions. Just go ahead and drop me a message. In today's session, it's going to be pretty informal. I mean, we're going to do quite a bit of demo so that we can really dive into it, but we're going to take a look at the classic versus the new UI that is available for SharePoint Online users. You're also going to see the creation and editing of views. There's quite a bit of options that are available, and I will walk you through some of them. And then into the advanced stuff, there is one thing that is usually asked and I usually have to troubleshoot, which is basically handling large lists, although we're going to talk about it in the later slide, but that's something that we're going to cover a little bit just to make sure that you are covered in case you run into this issue. And then really the more interesting part of the demo, I believe it's going to be related to JSLink, what it is and how we can play around the data and the visual of it through SharePoint Designer. So this session is really dedicated to like power users and developers that are getting into the SharePoint technologies and SharePoint views. So hopefully you're going to find some of the information useful. But before we jump into the demo, let's see which use case are pretty common for SharePoint lists. Well, the first thing is that it's pretty versatile. I mean, like you have the ability to create lists very, very quickly and simply from the SharePoint interface. It's really easy to set up actually, and I'm going to show you that in few clicks you will have a placeholder for your data that will be available online. There is quite a bit of templates already built, and you have the options to create your own templates too. So you're going to be able to do and leverage things like task lists, contact lists, announcement lists. There's about a few dozen more that comes pre-built with any SharePoint instance. What you're going to be able to leverage to is all the power behind the SharePoint. So you're going to have access to workflows and content type, automations. So really, that's something that definitely differentiates SharePoint from classic database, is that all those tools ships directly with the SharePoint list and is integrated to the system. And what you're going to see too is that you're going to be able to connect to external source for those of you that do have the need for this functionality. Now, when not to use SharePoint, it's basically when you have highly complex dependencies or relationship, you need like a very relational structure. And in that case, it's probably preferable to use a database system. And if you are recording large amount of records, I mean, 10,000, 100,000 and above, SharePoint list will have that limitation. And there's actually a threshold. There's a screenshot right below. This is something that you may have encountered. It's basically the default list view threshold in SharePoint Online. It's limited to 5,000 items. So if you run into that, like I said, we're going to review how to go and counter that. But that's definitely some of the limitations. So if you know ahead of time that you're going to migrate or record 10,000s of items, then it's probably better to use a database system or rather on Azure or AWS and stick to that. But SharePoint lists definitely have its limitation. So some of the limits to keep in mind is, the attachment file size. So, like it's 2 GB per item. And then the list view threshold, it's 5,000 items per view. And that's something that I will show you how to go around. But it's definitely the limit imposed by the SharePoint Online. And that's not something that you can touch at the very least on the SharePoint Online version. All right, so let's switch to our screen right here. And I have a SharePoint Online setup. And basically what I'm going to show you is how easily you can create a SharePoint list. So what you need to do is to have contribute access and above in order to do that. So over here, I'm a site collection administrator, so really no problem. What I'm going to do is go to the site content, and you can see that you have access to the list right here. So if you do that, it's going to create a custom list, which is basically just a title field and the automated fields that comes out of the box with any list, which are the created, created by, modify, modified by type of field. But in this case, if I were to create a list right here, it will create a custom list with one customizable field, which is the title of it. So let's say simple list right here, just to show you how it's going to look like right here. And so when you take a look at this list, you are, because I'm running the SharePoint Online version of it, you are using the SharePoint modern view. And you're going to notice that because a lot of the items right here, for those of you who are familiar with SharePoint lists in a previous version, are going to be branded a little bit differently. But it's essentially the same access to the same features, and you're going to have a lot of the same interaction with the SharePoint list. It's a little bit more intuitive. You can add custom column pretty quickly. So for example, let's say that we want to add a multiple line of text. Right here, just click on this button, and I'm going to have access to this pop-up right here, and really quickly go through and save that, and it's going to instantly add that to my list. All the other type of columns that I can add are available right here. And for those who are a little bit more special, like the lookup, for example, that will be available from the more options right here, which is going to bring you to a more classic view of the creation of a column right here. So we could do like, for example, a calculated column or hyperlink column from this perspective right here. So I'm going to just call it like a person for the sake of this. And click OK. In terms of the difference with the classic view too, is the fact that as soon as you modify something, whether it's the order or the sorting param, you're going to be able to save that pretty quickly as a new view. So let's say that I'm going to go ahead and fill this with a little bit of data. So we're going to do like test, for example. Hello. And then I'm going to pick myself right here. And let's say that I want to group by person, which, I mean, it's only going to be me at this point. You're going to notice that little star right here on the right-hand side, which basically means that you alter the default view, and it's going to suggest you that you can save this view And so you're basically saying, well, this all items view, which is the default view of all lists, is going to be, altered, or you can just rename that. So let's say that this is the qua view right here. And as soon as you do that, if you want to access different view, you notice that it changed the name of the view. If I want to go back to the all items view, it's right here. So this is going to be the difference between my two views. You also have access to quite a bit of recent activities on the right-hand side, which was not necessarily available easily from the classic view. So that's quite a nice feature. I think that they added that and they did the right thing right here for this SharePoint modern view. You're going to be able to set quickly this view as the default view. That means that if I were to set qua as the default view, any person accessing this list right here will automatically land on the qua view. One thing to notice too is that to bring the, you don't have access to the ribbon anymore. That is something that used to appear right here on the left, and I'm actually going to turn on the classic SharePoint view later on so that you can see that. But it's no longer available. Like all the interaction is going to be done from here, this navigation up here, and you're also going to have access to your list settings from this menu right now. They put it in the cog icon dropdown. So that's how to create views in the SharePoint modern view, really like just interacting with the data, trying to do some sorting, filtering of some sort, and being able to leverage that. You also have access to the creation of view via the list setting. And this is more of a classic way of building views. But if you scroll all the way down on your list settings right here, you can create a view. And so for those of you who used previous version of SharePoint, you should be pretty familiar with this. It's basically going to ask you what type of view you want to create. So I'm going to create a standard view right here. And maybe I'm going to call that like sort by name. You still have access to the audience view. So if you want to create a personal view, which is only accessible to you, or if you want to create a public view, which will be available to all the users, and that means that you can share that with your colleagues. So same thing, I mean, in terms of the columns, you have the ability to select all of those columns and display them and change the order. So right here we have title being displayed and description and person. What we want to do, maybe it's add the ID as the first item of the list. We're going to bring in the created and created by, and the modified and modified by. You're going to be able to, set up some sorting. So I'm going to do right here, select, the created field, for example. And you're going to be able to do all of your filtering. So right here, if I wanted to bring only the items that are with the person is equal to my name. So that means only items within the list that match this filter will be displayed. You have the ability to do things like grouping. It's a bit easier in the modern view, like I showed you, but it's definitely possible from here too. You have the ability to bring up total. So right here, like let's say that we want to count the number of items. I'm going to count the IDs because it's definitely something that is pre-generated for all the items in the list. So I'm going to have a true count right here. There's definitely the styling. So the default styling is the one that we're using right now, but if you wanted to do a basic table, a newsletter, a shaded, you will be able to do that. I don't necessarily use it a lot, or a lot more than I thought I would. I usually stick to the default view, but it's definitely a nice option available right here. Then this one is quite important. It's actually going to be something that allows you to flatten the view of a specific list, but that will really just focus on like document library list. Here we're working purely with data, so we don't necessarily have folders, but the option is definitely there. The item limit is the number of items that you want to return on the view that you are creating. So right here, per default, it's set to 30. Maybe we should set that to something like 500. And it's going to ask you if you want to batch that. That means that if you have 600 items in this case scenario, then you will have two pages, the first one being 500, the first 500 items, and the second page will be the remaining 100 items. If you do the limit total number, it's only going to bring you the first 500 items that match your sorting, filtering, and grouping param, right? So if you limit the total number, that's it. If there's 1,000 items behind that, it's not going to display it because you're basically saying, I don't want to see it. But I'm going to leave it as default. And then after that, there are some mobile options right here. So I'm just going to click OK and see the view being generated. Again, it's in the modern view of the SharePoint. And it basically applied whatever we said, right? It filtered by the person. It got the right item being displayed. If I were to create a new item right here, and so test number 2, this is another test. And here add maybe DOM, for example, and save that, then it won't necessarily be available on this view right here because I did filter. So if I go to the all items right here, you can see the two records. So this is for the modern view. Let's click on the return to classic SharePoint. And this will basically trigger the same view in the classic mode of SharePoint. This is the one that we've been used and accustomed from the 2007 version. And this is what you would expect SharePoint to look like per se. And again, right here, we're going to have access to our little menu right here from the ribbon area. And this is where you're going to be able to modify the view, create a new view, do quick edits, and things like that. All right, so this is how to create and edit a view in SharePoint. And so we're going to take a look at a few of the templates list that are available on the SharePoint out of the box. So let me go back to the site content. And right here, instead of creating a new list, what we're going to do is add an app. So some of the lists, they call it app in SharePoint, right? And it's still a list. I mean, you know, the task right here is a SharePoint list that is being customized and pre-populated for you. So you could add a list, you could add contact right here. You could create your own list and then save it and use it as a template. So let's go ahead and actually use the contact list. And I'm going to call that, you know, NIFTIT webinar contact. There are some advanced options that are available, but I usually don't touch it because it's basically just a description. So I'm going to have to do that again and create. So it created the SharePoint list, and now we're going to be able to have access to like last name, first name, contact every time that we create a new record to this table. And then if you take a look at the list settings right here, you're going to notice like all those fields being created for us. So it's pretty detailed in terms of like the content type that it's being used. What we're going to do is create a little bit of records. So I'm going to show you how to edit that pretty quickly. We're going to do like, that's not my last name. And I'm going to populate a few more records. Let's see. And John Doe. Running out of idea. Oops. Doe. John. All right, so we have a few records right here. We're going to stop editing. And so, again, if you want to alter the view, just go to the modified view. But I filled out this information so that we can leverage that into the next step of the presentation, which will be the JSLink. So before we jump into JSLink, though, there is a question that I get quite a lot. It's people using SharePoint list, and it's grown over time, and now they reach the 5,000 item limit. So I tried to do that. I mean, I created a contact list earlier today, and I populated it with a bit of information. I wasn't even near the 5,000 items. I came to like 3,000, and already the list started to act a little bit slow on my side. And you're specifically going to notice that when you go into the quick edit mode right here. Because when you're using the quick edit mode, it is going to try to pull all of the records in that single view. So right here, you can already notice that it's acting up, right, on SharePoint Online. There's not much we can do about that. I mean, it's going to do its best. It's not bad. I mean, we waited less than a minute, but it's still not as snappy as if you were to be under, you know, the 1,000 row records. So I'm going to show you what needs to be done. I wasn't able to get to the error, right? Because I'm halfway there in terms of like the number of items, but the steps are going to be the same. It's basically if you run into this issue right here, where it's not going to allow you to do much with the view because SharePoint is warning you that you reach out the limit. So what we can do when we run into those limits, we can utilize the indexation of columns. And so there is a limit of 20 index columns per list. The first one being obviously the ID, right, field of your SharePoint list, but you can add up another 20 index column. And that will allow you to go around for a little while at the very least the SharePoint threshold limit for views. So I'm going to show you that. Another one that is recommended too is organizing the item into folders, and that really just applies for document library, not necessarily list view. But for those of you that are taking those advice for document library, I think it's kind of counterintuitive because document library is not necessarily, folders are not necessarily the way to go, right? Like it's better to keep everything flat so that way you can better manage like the tags, the enterprise metadata. But it is a way to go and circumvent the 5,000 items limit. Another one too that can be used is limiting the items on the display. So it's a good way to trick the system. I mean, you could set a limit to like 4,999, and that way it will go around the SharePoint list limit. But what is tricky with this one is that you're still going to have access to the search box in the list view. So let me switch back over here. And yeah, like it's a little bit slow done. Let's go back to our simple list, I guess. Right. In those lists, you have access to a search box right here. And so if you limit your view to 4,999 without batch, basically when people are going to search, they're going to think, well, they're only going to search within those 4,999 items, right? And they're going to think that this is it. If they don't see the result, they're going to think, well, that item doesn't exist. And it's not necessarily true. It could exist in the list. It's just that it's not part of this batch view. So good way to do it, but I think it could be counterintuitive, again, for some of the users. Another way to do it is to edit the default view, so the all items view. If you edit that view and you use one of those tricks, like the limitation of the display, for example, then it will allow you to create more views. It's a way to go around it. Actually, it's recommended to change that default view so that way you don't run into headache later on. And the final trick is really to use and update the list view threshold limit, which is 5,000 per default, in central administration. But if you're on SharePoint Online, unfortunately, this option is not really available for you because it's going to affect all the tenants. So you don't even have this option. For those of you that are on SharePoint on premises, you could do that, but keep in mind that it's going to affect your performances. So you have to monitor that, make sure that you're not impacting the performances overall of the server when you're adjusting this limit. All right, so let's go. My preferred method and the recommended one is definitely to index the column, and I'm going to show you that. So every list allows you to index one or multiple columns. And so in the classic view or the modern view, you're going to pretty much do the same thing. You're going to go to the list settings. And from there, it's going to be kind of like the same unique experience. Right here, you're going to see index column. So you want to click on that. And right here, it's warning you that right now you have 0, well, it's a new list, right? So you have 0 index column out of 20. So I'm going to create a new index. And I'm going to use the person field, for example, as one of the possible index and just create that. So as soon as you do that, it's going to run, it's going to list basically what is the index available. In the background, what it's doing is basically indexing basically that specific column. And by doing that, you prevent your list to not being able to create new views or view the views that you have created. And that's a way to go around it. So if you run into that issue, just apply an index to one of the columns, run it, and then you're going to be able to re-access some of the list view that may have been altered or prevented from viewing. All right. So now that we have that, let's move on to JSLink. And so, although it's not necessarily recommended to alter the views of SharePoint list views, I think the JSLink, which was introduced in SharePoint 2013, is a nice additional features. It definitely allows you to bring a little bit more life into the display of some of the lists. And it's only available in the classic view. So that's maybe a disadvantage for some of you guys. For me, being able to add JSLink to some of the views definitely spice things up. And so I'm going to show you an example right here. I've built this list right here, and then we're able to bring on links, being able to do little labeling right here, and bring on buttons. All of that is done with JSLink. In order to use JSLink, though, you're going to have to install the latest version of SharePoint Designer, which is SharePoint Designer 2013 in my case. And we're all going to work with JavaScript. So for those of you who are familiar with the language, it's going to be pretty easy. If not, follow along. I think it should be fine. And a great resource to get started on JSLink is actually this site right here. And I will post the link to it. But just do a research on Bing or Google for JSLink, and that is the main documents or the main article that have quite a bit of example related to the JSLink templating. So we're going to run a few of those actually. So let's use our contact simple list. Now what did I call it again? Let me go back to the site content. Webinar contact right here. So let's use our webinar contact in order to do some JSLink modification. So let's go and open up our SharePoint Designer, which I already have open right here. I'm going to close all those windows and bring that over. Okay, so I just opened basically the site that I want to work with. And what I'm going to do is just go to the site assets right here. You may or may not have a folder. I like to keep things a little bit organized, so I created a JavaScript folder, but you could have it at the root. And just create a new asset, which will be a JavaScript. And here, we can call it whatever we want. Again, just to keep things organized, I'm going to call that webinar contact.js. Keep the extension, obviously it's important. And I'm going to go to the properties, and I'm going to select this little bit of location right here. Click OK. So what we want to do, and you may have noticed that if you play with the properties of a SharePoint list, but if you go and edit the page that you want to add JSLink into, and select the web part right here, edit the web part. At the bottom, under the miscellaneous area, you're going to see a JSLink. And they say, use this property to link an external JavaScript file for rendering the data. And this is exactly what we want to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and save the link that I just previously copied and apply that. So now we have our file that is connected to this view, this list library right here. So I'm going to stop editing. We've done exactly what we wanted to do. One thing that you want to notice too is that because it is a JavaScript file, while you're developing that script, it might cache the file. So what I'm recommending for people, it's available on Chrome, on Firefox, on Internet Explorer, and Edge, right? Is to go to inspect right here, or you can do like a F12, or you can do, you know, like your settings right here, more tools, developer tools, whatever you're more preferable with. And what you want to do is make sure that under your network tab, you have disabled the cache right here, which means that it will try to catch or get the latest JS file that we created every time that we refresh the page. So that way we know that we get the latest one. One thing too is that, and I forgot to mention that, but it's quite important. Let's go back to the JSLink right here. So I'm just going to put that, you can just leave it right at the bottom of your screen and edit the web part. Is that it's actually not going to like the full address that you provided them. So, you know, you see I've added the link right here, but it's actually scrapping out the first like domain part of it. So what I need to do is do this wave sign right here and do site, and being able to click on it, and that will point to the right file. So remember, let me pull up a notepad right here. What you want to do, instead of just copying the link right here, you want to copy the part that is the domain, remove that, and switch that with site. And that will make things all nice and easy for you. Right here. And so now we get exactly what we want. Everything is in order. So I'm just going to put that right down and keep it open, because as soon as you close that, then basically you're starting to cache again. So now we have this view and we have the JavaScript file. So what I would suggest is first go to this link that I'm going to provide to you and use one of the first sample right here. And so we're going to be able to analyze that. And you can read that. Obviously, it's containing a lot of information but I'm just going to go to the JavaScript part for those of you who don't know how to code and just want to go straight to the good stuff, and copy that. And we're going to edit our webinar contact.js and paste that. Okay. So now what do we have? We have quite a bit of things right here going on. It's establishing some context, it's bringing some templates, and it's going to bring the templates field. So what is important to note right here, you may want to change those to make it more relevant to your form, but if you just want to go straight to result, then basically make sure that the field right here is actually the name of a field that exists. Right? So we don't have a priority field in our list. What we do have, let me bring the form up, is the company, for example. So let's go ahead and change that to company. And that means that in this case, what I want to modify is the field name company. And then each field will have a function, and basically this function is pure JavaScript, but it's basically going to act or do some kind of modification around the field. And in this case, it's pulling the field name, which is company, right? And there is a switch case that will allow me to do different things depending on the case scenario. So in our case, like let's say that we want to have different colors for different company name, for example. So there's a company called JD, right? We know that there is one called NIFTIT, and there is one called Cantor. I believe I spelled it like this. Let's just go ahead and check. Yep. So if we go ahead and save that, and we're basically saying, well, we want to alter the company field. And depending on the name of the company, then it will display in different colors. So right here we have gray or red and whatnot. So let's go ahead and refresh that. And you're going to notice that, let's see what's going on. Yeah, and refresh that, and yeah, we're able to see that. So I'm just going to save that right here and push that at the bottom. And so you can see like we have 3 case scenario, and obviously it's changing its color. Let's say that this is taking a little bit of space, and all I really want to do is show an icon, or show an image, or the word email me if there's some potential emails. So what I'm going to do in that case, go back right here. I think you get the hang of it, is basically just create a copy of this right here. And in this case, it's the email address. So you have to make sure, this is important, you have to make sure that you are getting the right name of the field. So in this case, one would think that it's email space address. But just to be sure, because especially when you have like spaces in field name, I'm just going to go to the list settings and make sure that I'm grabbing the right name, and it might be with an underscore. So I'm just going to click on the column name right here, and you're going to see in the URL, this is the good way to get it, it's actually just called email, right? So that's the internal field name for the email address. So I'm just going to copy this. And again, I'm going to paste it right here, and I'm going to create a new function this time because I can't reuse the same one. So all we need to do is copy a little bit of this, being able to change that to email template, for example. Copy this, put it right here. And in this case, all I need to do, and all that really interests me, is if there is an email that exists, right, I want to be able to return the email address right here, but just email contact, for example, right here. I'm just going to add some class for styling, and the email is going to be a mail to the email address. And obviously I could do some verifications and whatnot, but if not, then if there's no email address, then we return nothing. Or we return, let's do this. No email for this contact, which is not really good. Okay, so we're going to save that. And again, go back to our list view. And we want to go to the same list view that we've previously engaged with, which is this one, and just go ahead and refresh that. So the cool thing with JSLink is because since it's JavaScript based, it's pretty much going to act like JavaScript. So I'm going to be able to do things like console log, for example, to see that in my browser. So let's go back right here, refresh this, and see what's going on. Yeah, so it's basically already giving me you know, the full link and not just like the text right here, which is the portion that we want to get from here. So what I'm going to do is because we're using jQuery on this site, I'm going to be able to do like something like email text right here. Let's save that. All right, and this looks better. So right here, a quick way to add a button so that way people can just go ahead and email their favorite contact or whatnot. So yeah, it's trying to launch my Outlook right now. And just to show you what it did, give it a second. Right here. Yeah, Outlook is acting up. But it basically just opened my Outlook with the mail to from the client. So you can do a bunch of verification with that. You can do a bit of styling on the pages. What you can do even more is really just interact with other lists too. Again, because it's JavaScript, if you're an advanced developer and you know like some JSON, you're going to be able to create a bit of script that interact after the data from other lists. So in this case, for example, let's say that you know, if you click on the name of the contact, for example, then it will just you know add a new item into the simple list, right? Something of that nature. So we want to go back right here, and this time we are going to alter the first name, for example. So again, just to make sure that I'm getting the right field name, I can go to the list settings. I'm going to show you another way to get that information. It's actually on SharePoint Designer. If you go to the list, am I on the right? Just refresh that. Okay, so you go to webinar contacts, edit list column, and right here, so we want to do a click and do something on the first name. If you just selected an administration web page, it's going to give you the field name right here, which is first name without a space. So we're going to go back into our SharePoint Designer and into the webinar contact.js that we modified. And right here, same thing, I'm going to create a new view with the first name template, for example. All right. So this is going to be our function. We need to bring in the context. And then here we're going to just return the field value. So here I'm just going to go and save our name, first name, and just return that around a clickable button. So um, nothing crazy so far. What we are going to add, though, to the screen is the ability to do some kind of on-click. So, like, we're going to do on-click, and then we're going to call another function that will, maybe add to the simple list that we've created earlier, like an item. Okay, so in order to do that, oops, I'm just going to close that. In order to do that, we're going to create a function. So every time that it's clicking on this, then we're going to do write something simple list. And we're going to trigger this function right here on the unclick. Okay, so let me go ahead and save that and show you what's going to happen. We need to go back to our webinar contact view, refresh that. We should have a hyperlink appearing around the first name. And then when I click that, well, nothing is happening because we don't have a function created to write to the list. If I go to the simple list right here, nothing is really happening. Okay, so let's go ahead and add another function that will write. And so here's the cool thing. I mean, it's definitely outside of the scope of this presentation, but if you are familiar with JSON, you're going to be able to create that also with JSLink. So I'm going to quickly create a function right here, and I'm actually going to copy some of the code that I already have right here and just basically use JSON to do something. So I'm going to go to the simple list field. I want to create set item. Come on. Come on. All right. And I'm going to set the item, I don't know, the item 1, for example, where is the title being updated. All right. So hopefully that works. We go back right here, and then I'm just going to go ahead and show you side by side the simple list. So right now the first item with ID 1, it's me right here, and it's a test, and I'm going to click on John and refresh this list, and it didn't work. Why? Oh, I know. It's literally just a programming error right here, and what we want to do is add the actual site URL. Okay, so that should work now. Let's go back and click on that, and then we're going to go right here, and it updated the item 1 with updated. Okay, so we are running out of time. There are quite a bit more example right here on the JSLink. You can do things like percentage display, which can be nice for some of you that create dashboard, for example. You could do like accordion. You could hide some field, which I use quite a bit actually sometimes. We can do repeater, and that is actually quite nice. I'm going to show you those two that I really like. So the repeater will allow you to basically do repeated field like this. So that's a nice way. It's not available out of the box in SharePoint. whether you use the modern or classic version. I think only the Nintex form will allow you to do this at this point, and InfoPath if you're still using that. But that is quite a nice feature, the ability to add, you know, sample repeater. And then here is the percentage completion right here. So it can couple, you know, different libraries too. You know, like on those views that I shown you earlier in this particular SharePoint list view, I'm using like Fort Awesome, for example, and Bootstrap to renders too. So that's a quite nice things to do. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any question, if you have anything that you would like to be recovered or deeply covered in the next session, feel free to comment and let me know. With that being said, I hope you really enjoy. We have a new product coming up called Optimist. It's an alternative to SharePoint, basically built on Office 365 as an application that directly ties into the features and APIs of the Office 365. So if you have the chance, go to www.optimist.com and review that. You have access to a 7-day free trial. Thank you very much. I hope to talk to you guys soon and to see you on the next webinar.